What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing some Fossil Cup battles with Metal Sound Revavroom, which you probably wouldn't expect to be any good, but it actually pulled off some insanely clutch wins for me. To start off with, I ran Frillish in the lead with Metal Sound Bronzong as the save swap, but eventually switched it out for Shadow Metang on Fury Cutter in that save swap position, and with that being said, let's just get straight into the question of the day. Which Pokemon that received a move update this season that you've not seen showcased anywhere else on YouTube would you like to see me feature on this channel? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. I'm starting into the first battle, leading Frillish into Ferrothorns. Of course, not ideal for me. I've got two steel types in the back. I'm going to save swap into my Bronzong, and I'm met with a Gastrodon. Now I'm going straight for Side Shock here. You will see when Side Shock connects, a second Side Shock unfortunately will not be enough damage to get the KO, so I do not throw straight away. The opponent goes for a Body Slam bait, which I'm able to successfully call, and now I'm full sending the payback. They've seen already Side Shock will not get the KO, but payback absolutely does. I'm able to flip switch advantage. The opponent comes back in with Ferrothorn, and they allow me to reach a second payback. Payback does big damage there. The opponent committing to a farm down, they're not going to get it, so they're forced to throw their energy. The opponent fires off the power whip there. That's fine with me. I can now come in with the Revavroom, and we are going to completely wall the grass type damage here. If of course they are on Thunder, I probably would have to shield that. It would do some decent damage, but they swap into Jellicent, and now we come in with the Frillish. Of course, Frillish, the unevolved version of Jellicent, but we've got better pacing with Nightshade here, so we're going to go for the Nightshade. Nightshade is going to be no shielded by the opponent. I actually overfarm slightly here. Fire off a second Nightshade. Nightshade has to be shielded at this point, and they do overfarm, but they're so low I can just come in with the Revavroom. Of course, Shadow Ball gets the KO there. We get the Metal Sound farm down, and of course, Overheat gonna be massive overkill. I don't have to hit any bubbles. The opponent has to call the bait there. They're unsuccessful, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there. Into the next battle, we see a Shadow Whiscash in the lead, which is definitely where we want to see it. However, this is still just a neutral matchup, maybe even a slightly losing matchup for the Frillish. But either way, I no shield the first move there. Gonna fire off one Hex, then go for that Nightshade. Nightshade going to do decent damage here. A second Nightshade will very nearly KO from this range. So Nightshade grabs a shield from the opponent, but the opponent can now overfarm considerably, farming up to very close to back-to-back Mud Bombs. At this point, I realize they're still going to outpace me even if I shield there, so I do let the Frillish go down. We're going to come in with the Bronzong. I can tank a Mud Bomb, so I might let the next move go through, but for now, we're going to fire for Side Shock here. We do overfarm ever so slightly. Side Shock grabs the final shield from the opponent. They bank a charge move before swapping into Shadow Sizzle, and unfortunately, they're able to outpace me to the move, but Bronzong, pretty bulky, we're able to tank that. Fire off the payback, and I'm going to go for an undercharge. Payback does not get the KO, but it puts them into Metal Sound farm down range for the Revavroom. I realize Whiscash does have that Mud Bomb loaded, so of course, I'm going to use my final shield here, but I will commit to a full Metal Sound farm down. Can we get the farm down? The opponent looks like we will, so the opponent swaps into a Shadow Cradilly. I'm going straight for Overheat. Overheat does huge damage, but I debuff my attack, and that means I do not get the farm down. The opponent reaches the Rock Tomb, but that also does not get the KO, and it allows me to come out with the Overheat loaded. We are now triple debuffed in our attack, but it doesn't matter. From that range, we take out the Whiscash, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there. Into the next battle, we see a Feraligatr in the lead. A bit of an awkward matchup for me, of course. Going to take a super effective fast move damage, but if they're not running Crunch, which they're probably not as they do throw straight away, then of course I will resist the charge moves. However, if we stay in this matchup for too long, then it can be quite awkward for me. So I fire off the Nightshade. Nightshade going to be no shielded. Up against Shadow Feraligatr, honestly, that does do quite a lot of damage, but you can see we do not put them into Hex farm down range, and instead the opponent can commit to that farm down there, coming out with a ton of loaded energy. Now, like I mentioned, we already expect that they're not on Crunch, otherwise they would have thrown it, but they come in with a Fire Fang Marwile. This is certainly not ideal for me. At this point, I can just barely live a power-up punch, so I'm going to go for the Payback here. Both moves are going to be resisted, however, Payback does do more damage, and they do no shield. We come in with the Revavroom. We've got two shields here, but it just doesn't really matter. They've boosted up their Fire Fang damage. They're going to boost it up once again. We can just barely commit to the farm down, but it's going to be game over here, unless the opponent, for whatever reason, no shields. Overheat is unfortunately shielded by the Bronzong. They can Metal Sound, farm down my own Bronzong, and unfortunately I do lose that game. But GG's up on their into next battle, seeing Azumarill in the lead. So this is a fine matchup for me. What I'm going to do actually is count to 6 hexes and then swap, hopefully catching a play rough. However, if they go for an Ice Beam bait, it doesn't really matter either. That is also resisted, but they come in with a Registeel. Now, once again, Bronzong is very bulky, so I should be able to tank this, whatever they throw. They go for Focus Blast there. However, unfortunately, that does kind of put me into perfect lock-on farm down range, which is probably the worst case scenario. Actually, I probably would have preferred to just be knocked out there, but we do reach a payback and a Psyshock. Psyshock, I'm hoping, puts them into range where a Nightshade will get the KO. We do have a move banked on the Frillish, so I think I'm just going to throw straight away here. Nightshade, going to be coming through here. I'm hoping probably grab a shield will be better for me, but Nightshade does connect, and it does not get the KO there. That is incredibly painful, especially since they maybe didn't even reach a Zap Cannon there, going for the Focus Blast, which is double resisted, but now they come in with a Ferrothorn, so I'm going straight for Nightshade. Nightshade doesn't do too much damage, but I can swap and catch a double resisted Power Whip onto my Revavroom. Of course, Power Whip not going to do much damage there. The opponent is going to stay in here, very close to banking a Charge Move, but swapping into Azumarill. Now, of course, Acid Spray not going to do much damage here, but it will mean these Metal Sands do start chunking a little bit more, and again, I should be able to resist this Charge Move very comfortably. They go for Play Rough. That is double resisted by the Steel and the Poison typing. A second Acid Spray coming through is going to drop their defense once again. I'm going to bank a Charge Move, swap into Frillish, get the snipe there, and now we have to shield off Frillish. The opponent did leave one away from a Charge Move, I do believe, which means now I can farm up 2 back-to-back Nightshades here. The first one should be grabbing the first shield from the opponent, and a second Nightshade should grab that final shield, but it just depends how much the opponent overfarms in this matchup. The opponent does overfarm quite considerably. That is probably the maximum amount they could have done. The opponent fires off the Power Whip, and if they're 1 away, I lose this game, but they are not. They were 2 away from the next Charge Move, and as a result, we reach the Overheat. It gets the KO there, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on their into next battle. See Jellicent in the lead now. Someone mentioned this a while ago with Frillish. If you've got a good IV Frillish, you should win CMP in this matchup against most Jellicent if they're running sort of good PvP IVs, but I am unfortunately running a pretty rubbish IV Frillish. You can see 12, 14, 14. This was basically the only lucky Frillish I had at the time of building this Pokemon, so unfortunately not ideal, and as a result, we do lose CMP up against pretty much every single Jellicent I've faced, which means also I don't do enough damage to get the KO with the Nightshade there. We come in with the Revavroom, but they've got a Swampert in the back, and things aren't looking too good for me. I'm going to fire off the Overheat here. Overheat does respectable damage considering it's non-stab, and it is resisted, but that is absolutely game over here. Unfortunately, not a lot I can do. I have to let this move go through. Night Slash is super effective. I'm now going to overfarm as much as I can, throwing just before they reach a second Night Slash. Payback does not get the KO, but we do get the farm down there. Doesn't really help me, as now the opponent can just come in with their Swampert. We go for Psyshock, grab the final shield, but they can just Mud Shot, farm me down. I've got a shield here, but it doesn't matter. The opponent will outpace me to back-to-back moves, so Hydro Cannon gets the KO there, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's top in there into next battle, another Ferrothorn in the lead. So once again swapping into Bronzong, and the opponent staying in for an absolute eternity before eventually swapping out into Gastrodon. Now, I did see this combination quite a few times. Ferrothorn in the lead, Gastrodon as the counter swap to my Safe Swap, which is definitely not ideal for me, but we did flip switch advantage the last time. We've got a shield advantage this time around, and I'm able to reach another Psyshock before the opponent throws a single charge move. Psyshock grabs the final shield there. However, they can commit to a huge Mudslap farm down, coming out with a ton of loaded energy. Now, of course, Frillish going to double resist Body Slam, but Earth Power will hit for some fairly decent damage here. I'm going to no shield, and they actually bait with the Body Slam. That is double resisted. It does pathetic damage. Again, I no shield, and again, they bait there. I don't really understand that decision, but either way, I'm firing off the Nightshade, but a brilliant catch there by the opponent. Sort of clawing it back there, of course, going for 2 baits, having both of them no shielded. They are able to make the catch, and also, not really ideal for me that they do bait out the Revavroom again, because I can't really do much here. Of course, up against the Gastrodon, it's not going to be very good. So I'm actually getting it as low as physically possible, firing off the Overheat. Overheat, of course, going to get the KO there. And I do come out with an Acid Spray loaded, and up against Galissapod. This is actually going to be very helpful for me, because now, of course, we can come in with the Frillish. These hexes are seriously chunking. The opponent might be able to swap out at this point. They go for the X's, and that is resisted damage, but they do not swap out in time. So we go for Nightshade. They're debuffed. It gets the KO there. there, and now I should be able to safely shield this up. It's probably another body slam bait, and it is exactly that, but it doesn't matter. Frillish now able to reach a Nightshade, and of course, Nightshade gets the KO there, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's to one there, into the next battle. We're going to see Frillish into Gastrodon. So this is definitely where we want to see it. However, not the most dominant matchup for us. Of course, these Mudslaps are going to chunk us. We're now going to go for a Nightshade. I throw just before they do reach a potential Earth Power. Nightshade, going to be no-shielded. At this point, of course, we've just seen a Gastrodon user double bait us, but I'm going to shield, and it is the Earth Power, which is great to see. This time, they're only going to reach a Body Slam, so I don't really understand why they throw straight away, but that's fine with me. They now swap into Berserker. I'm going to go straight for Nightshade once again. Nightshade actually grabs a shield from the opponent, so now I'm swapping into my Revavroom. Now, this is a bit awkward for me, of course. I'm a Steel and Poison type, so close combat hits for neutral damage, and I'm just barely able to reach an Overheat, which is huge for me. Overheat gets the KO there. They come in with their final Pokemon, a Feraligatr, but this is still very awkward for me, of course. I've got Bronzong in the back. We're going to take super effective damage from both the Shadow Claws and the Mudslaps, so I'm going to have to no-shield this first move here as they fire off the Hydro Cannon. We are now going to overfarm, fire off a Side Shock just before they reach the next Hydro Cannon there. I'm going to try and overfarm as much as I can in this matchup. Never mind. Ignore what I just said there. Instead, I'm going to go for a Side Shock and look for the snipe with the Frillish. I'm able to successfully snipe there. Nightshade gets the KO, but Frillish, can we reach a last second move? No, just barely not able to do so. They're able to Mudslap farm me down, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG so by there, into the next battle, we see a Seismitoad in the lead. So very spicy lead here. And again, where we want to see the Mud Boy. So here, I'm going to go for 5 hexes, fire off the Nightshade. Nightshade going to be no-shielded by the opponent. And I'm going to no-shield this first charge move as well. The opponent goes for a Muddy Water bait. Absolutely fine with me. I'm now going to go and fire off a second Nightshade. Nightshade number 2 grabs a shield from the opponent. At this point, I do not expect them to bait. So I'm going to shield this up. And they're actually on Sludge Bomb there. So of course, could have tanked that fairly comfortably. But they swap into a second Mud Boy. So this opponent just clearly doesn't believe that grass types exist in this meta. And to be fair, I've not seen an awful lot of grass types apart from Ferrothorn, which is actually fairly common there. So never mind, I take that back. Ferrothorn is actually pretty much on every single team that I face. But either way, we go for Nightshade. Nightshade grabs the final shield here. And at this point, of course, all shields are down on my end. The opponent fires off a Skull, which does give me hope that they're maybe not on Mud Bomb here, but I overfarm and I lose CMP. Obviously, don't use Bronzong too often. I'm not familiar with this matchup. I did not realize we're actually so bulky that we lose CMP there, so I go for an undercharge, hoping to come in with my Revavroom and snipe them, but the opponent swaps into their Seismitoad, so unfortunately, Muddy Water, again losing CMP, but just barely hanging on. Again, we go for the undercharge. This time, it gets the KO, so I swap into my Revavroom, and what do they have in the back? They've got a Caracosta, but they're on Rock Throw, so we have a lifeline here. Rock Throw, of course, gonna be resisted. Metal Sound hitting for neutral damage, but Acid Spray and Overheat are resisted. The opponent reaches a charge move, but it's just a Body Slam that is persisted damage here. I'm overfarming just slightly, and even though it's double resisted and non-stab, Overheat gets the KO there up against the debuff Caracosta, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there, into the next battle, see a Shadow Excadrill in the lead. This is really awkward for me, definitely where we want to see it, but they swap into a huge Core Breaker for the team. A Magneton, and unfortunately, there's just not a lot I can do here. Of course, taking super effective damage. Now we swap into Bronzong, but I'm hitting for double resistant Metal Sound damage. The opponent fires off the Discharge. Discharge doesn't do too much damage, but they're already at another Discharge. So at this point, I'm gonna have to shield this up here. Of course, I could have just barely tanked that, but I kind of need to shield, preserve some health here. Otherwise, Excadrill just farms down the rest of my team. I go for a bait, and it does not pay off there, but it does put them into range where hopefully Revavroom can come in and fully farm them down. I'm gonna have to use my final shield here, as of course, once again, Metal Sound is still gonna be double resisted, but I should be able to go for a very aggressive one shield farm down here. They go for Discharge, and we're committing to the farm down. We get that farm down. Honestly, I probably should have just thrown the charge move there. I swap into Frillish, and unfortunately met with a Razor Leaf Ludicolo, and there's just nothing I can do here, unfortunately. I go for Nightshade. I needed to grab the final shield there. I'm not able to do so. I can fire for an Overheat. Overheat will get the KO, but it doesn't matter. They've still got a shield remaining. They can go for one Mudslap, taking out the Revavroom, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG so by there into next battle, see a Skarmory in the lead, and they're actually on Air Slash rather than Steel Wing, and that makes a bit of sense here, of course. Air Slash is going to be neutral into a lot of water types, while Steel Wing is going to be resisted. I'm able to swap, catch the move, and by the way, I have now swapped out the Bronzong for the shiny Shadow Metang, which is actually got pretty good PvP IVs as well, so not that bad for me. We're going to go for the Side Shock. Side Shock are going to grab a shield from the Scizor, and if they commit to a farm down, we're actually able to reach another Side Shock before they fully farm me down here. Side Shock grabs a final shield, but they are absolutely loaded on energy, so what I'm hoping for here is the opponent's going to blind throw a Trailblaze to boost up their attack. So I'm going to no-shield the first move here on my Revavroom, and they do. They go for the Trailblaze. I then swap into Frillish. I'm now going to be forced to shield this, but I am one away from a Nightshade, and because they use more energy going for that Trailblaze, I'm able to reach that Nightshade. Nightshade gets the KO there, and let's see what the opponent wants to do. The opponent comes in with a Poliwrath. They're actually on Mudshot there. They're looking to catch a charge move, but now I can just hold on to the energy on my Frillish, fire off the Nightshade here after over-farming. Nightshade gets the KO, and the opponent does reach a charge move, but Frillish, a complete wall. I don't even need to use my shield here. Instead, I no shield. I'm going to come in with the Revavroom. I thought about going for an Acid Spray here, but actually Overheat, even though it's resisted damage, does big damage there. That certainly puts them into range where a single Nightshade will get the KO here. I do lose CMP with the Frillish, but it doesn't matter. Even if they've got back-to-back charge moves here, it's a CMP tie. Nightshade going to be coming through, and of course, from this range, it takes out the Poliwrath, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG to opponent there into the next battle. See Frillish into Togedemaru, so a huge core breaker to the team. I'm going to swap into my Metang, and the opponent actually swaps out of that matchup into Ferrothorn. And this is great for me, of course. Revavroom would be ideal, but we're going to keep it away from our Frillish, which is definitely ideal for me. And I'm able to reach back-to-back Side Shocks already. As well, Fury Cutters hitting for neutral damage, and we grab both shields there. I don't really understand why they double shielded. They can resist all our charge moves, and then they go for an Acid Spray bait there. Things going from bad to worse for the opponent. I'm going to no-shield once again, and Power Whip, not enough damage, even with that drop to my defense. I'm now going to fire off a Side Shock, and what I probably want is actually for the opponent to throw their energy here. So what I'm not going to do is throw straight away. I realize the opponent is not going to throw a charge move. Instead, they're looking to farm me down, so I go for a Side Shock at the last second, only giving one Mudshot away to the Poliwrath coming in, and this should be game over, of course. We can align our Revavroom to the Togedemaru. I just have to shield this up here, even if they do reach back-to-back wild charges, or if they bait with a Fell Stinger, doesn't really matter. I'm going for the Overheat, and of course, Overheat gets the one shot there. They come back in with the Poliwrath, and we're going to force the opponent to throw a charge move. The opponent going to go for that Ice Punch, but it does not get the KO there. That is resisted damage. I can now fire off the Acid Spray. Acid Spray, again, also not going to do much damage, but we can come in with the Frillish. They're debuffed in their defense by 2 stages. Nightshade does big damage, and again, Frillish, a complete wall to Poliwrath. I do not need to shield. The opponent fires off the Dynamic Punch there. Double resisted. We get that farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle. See Feraligatr in the lead once again. So once again, bit awkward for me here, of course, but the opponent's going to swap into Lucario, and that is absolutely fine with me, of course. They might be on Thunder Punch, they might be on Shadow Ball. Either way, I don't really care. I'm just going to shield this up, and the opponent does not shield, so I can now just commit to a full Hex farm down, shielding up the Thunder Punch. I should actually just barely live a Thunder Punch there, but I might as well shield whilst I'm taking double resisted fast move damage, rather than let that go through and allow Feraligatr to come in and then fully farm me down. Now the opponent has to throw a charge move, but even then, a Hydro Cannon probably does not KO from this range. So at this point, I'm going to no shield. The opponent goes for Hydro Cannon. We can now swap into our shiny Shadow Metang, and they will reach another charge move here. I'm actually going to shield this up. I should be able to Fury Cutter farm them down. They actually go for an Ice Beam there, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but we're going to take it anyways. We go for the Side Shock. Side Shock is going to be no shielded. We reach another Side Shock here, but unfortunately, looks like they're committing to a full farm down. Can we reach a last second Side Shock? No, we faint just as we're reaching it. And now what we need to do here is come in with the Revavroom. They're probably going to go for one Mud Slap anyways, so we try to swap out, but I just misclicked there. I don't really know what happened. I don't know how I didn't manage to swap out there, but unfortunately, I made a mistake there, and they go for the Earth Power. They farm down my Frillish, and unfortunately, I do lose that game, but GG's to the opponent there. Into the next battle, we see a Melmetal in the lead. Now, actually, Frillish probably has a decent matchup there, just because if they're on double Iron Bash and Superpower, which they probably are on, then of course I'm going to resist both those charge moves. So maybe could have stayed in there, but I swap into my shiny Shadow Metang. I'm going to go for back-to-back Side Shocks hits. The opponent does not throw straight away. And Side Shock number 2 actually grabs a shield there, as they have debuffed their defense and their attack by 1 stage, and now 2 stages with that second Superpower. At this point I realize I can just no shield this. The opponent goes for another superpower that is double debuffed and it is double resisted before swapping into Hisuian Avalanche. Now, I can swap into my Revavroom. I'm going to go for a Nightshade first, hoping to put them into farm down range, but they actually use their shield there. So I'm going to no shield this. It could be a crunch, worst case scenario, I think. this Pokemon learns crunch, but either way, we swap into Revavroom and look at the double super effective metal sounds. Absolutely shredding through them. They go for an icy win there, debuffing my attack, but I get the full farm down, but the opponent comes in with a Quagsire. So at this point, I'm already debuffed, but I'm going to go for an Acid Spray. Acid Spray, going to debuff the defense by 2 stages. Now I can full send the Overheat. This is resisted damage, but it does respectable damage there. We can come in with the Frillish, go straight for the Nightshade. Nightshade gets the KO there. And of course, all I need to do right now is shield up these charge moves. Double Iron Bash is resisted, but it did get a buff this season. We get the full farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG to up in there into the final battle of this video, once again leading into Jellicent. So once again, we're going to see if we can win CMP in this matchup. And unfortunately, once again, we do end up losing CMP there. So, of course, gonna shield up the Shadow Ball there. The opponent does not bait, which is nice for me. I can now fire off the Nightshade. Nightshade, gonna grab a shield back from the opponent. I can now overfarm by a single Hex. Fire off the Nightshade here. And Nightshade might be double shielded, and it is double shielded. So at this point, I'm definitely also gonna double shield here. It's gonna be quite tricky to take out the Jellicent if we do not double shield, but the opponent swaps to make a very nice catch there, catching the Nightshade onto Pelipper, but that's okay with me. Gonna come in with my shiny Shadow Metang, and the opponent will reach a charge me before I get to the Side Shock, but that's okay with me. Weather Ball, we're able to tank that fairly comfortably, and even these resisted Fury Cutters non-stab are kind of chunking. They put them into Side Shock range. Side Shock gets the KO there, but once again the opponent has a Gastrodon in the back. Definitely not ideal for me, but can I reach back-to-back Side Shocks here? First one doing big damage, and this time I'm able to reach a second Side Shock. This will connect. All shields are down. It gets the KO. I now swap straight away into Revavroom, not giving the opponent any extra energy than they need. They go for a Surf there, realizing Shadow Ball probably does not cut it, and they reach back-to-back Surfs, but it just depends. Have they overfarmed at all, or can Frillish outpace them in the endgame scenario? We already know we lose CMP. I need to outpace them to the Nightshade, and I'm just barely able to do so. And of course, Nightshade going to be enough damage to take out the Jellicent, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.